Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Well, Tony, we're about to do one of the shows that I like the least. It's the one where you're like, no, I got it. We don't need to, we're doing over-unders. What are the over-unders? Don't you worry your pretty little head. We'll talk about it on the air. So I have no chance to do any prep work and a tremendous opportunity to come out looking like an absolute fool. It is my least favorite kind of show, your most favorite kind of show. Let's go.
Let's go. Now, Tom, I will say these all, except for maybe one of them, come from Twitter and the message board because I put a call out. So you could have, if you followed me on Twitter, you could have seen all of these. Or if you followed me on a message board and didn't have me blocked, you could have seen all of these and prepared. But these aren't all going to be terrible. Some of these are going to be very, very easy. And in order to have a good podcast title, we will start out with Jeremiah Smith, do some over-unders on Jeremiah Smith. And these come from, this first one comes from Inside the Pylon podcast at ITPCFB on Twitter. This is a very easy one, Tom, but we're going to discuss it and move on and ramp it up. Jeremiah Smith receiving yards has been put at 500. I was just waiting for you to say over as soon as I said 5.
When you said 5, I was like, if he says 100, I'm going to say over. If he says 1,000, I'm going to say under. And based on the level of hype around Jeremiah Smith, I'm not sure what the next word is going to be. But 500, yes, easy over for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there as well. Like we've talked about him many times in the past. I am expecting all of the freshman records to be broken. Initially, I was going to put the number at 995.5, and I'm already on the oversight of that. I have been, I'm on plenty of oversight of that since the spring. I think it's not a sure thing because it's ridiculous to say, hey, this freshman's going to have 1,000 yards receiving because he shouldn't. However, we're not talking about your typical freshman, but we are still talking about how many footballs are there to go around. And so I'll set it at 995 and a half and see where you are on that one.
Boy, I'm real conflicted here because my brain is going, well, obviously he's going to do that, especially because they're going to, potentially going to play 16 games this year. And if you spread that over 16 games, it's only like 60 yards or something like that a game. So to me, that's a pretty easy over. If we're looking at this just in terms of the regular season, I'll probably take the under on that probably, but I'd really have to think about it over the course of the whole season, postseason included. Even if it's just 15 games, it's still probably a fairly easy over for me. So yeah, we have really been trying since day one of this whole thing to not get the hype train rolling downhill out of control with no brakes. There have been a lot of forces working against us on that front, Tony. Notably, the stuff Jeremiah Smith does in front of other people who are watching. So yeah, I'm going to say over the 995.5.
There's only, and Carnell Tate said this when we talked to him last week. He mentioned that 1,000 yards was his goal. And then somebody else asked him real quick, well, how many guys can have 1,000 yards receiving? He's like, well, three of us, 3 starters, and maybe 4. And then, you've got 2,000 yard rushers. And it's like, well, hold on. Not everybody can have 1,000 yards. But if you're a starting wide receiver at Ohio State, that is kind of right now the starting point. But they've only had 2 guys hit 1,000 yards, I think, twice. And that would have been, I assume, 2021 with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson, and then 2022 with Marvin and Emeka, I believe. So if I set the number of 1,000 yard receivers this year at 1.5, I'm probably taking the over on that one, but these guys are going to be robbing from each other.
They are going to be robbing from each other to a certain degree. And I think, we could get to this later maybe, but over under on 1,000 yard rushers plus receivers. Is that number 3.5, Tony? It feels like it might be 3.5. We'll get to that one later. Let's talk first about the 1,000 yard receivers. I think I'm going over 1.5. And in addition to the wide receivers who are quite good this year, and, the only thing keeping Ohio State from having 3,000-yard receivers this year is there are only so many footballs, and they're going to be running the ball, and, they're not going to be playing these guys deep into the second halves of all of these games. The only thing that really makes me think that over 1.5 for guys getting to 1,000 yards is a pretty decent bet is the uncertainty about wide receivers 4 through 6, 4 through 7 on the roster. It feels like 1 through 3, Carnell Tate, Emeka Ibuka, Jeremiah Smith, in some order, they feel very good about. I think number 4, Brandon Inniss, it seems like they're feeling pretty good about. Beyond that, there's going to be a drop off. So I don't think you're going to see 5, 6, and 7 in a ton of first halves of games. So you're going to, you're not going to have guys vulturing yards too early in games. So I'll go over the 1.5. Like you said, it's only happened a couple times. I think 98, didn't D. Miller finish with 900 and something yards, 980 yards or something like that? Like they almost did it that year. Feels to me like they're probably going to have 2 guys in that neighborhood. And, this is the time of year for optimism. And so everyone's going over every one of these, I'm sure. But yeah, we'll say over 1.5 guys with 1,000 yards receiving.
We can get to this eventually, but yeah, that 3.5 of 1,000-yard rush receivers, I'm going over, because when you said that, I immediately thought 4.5, which is because I think they're both going over 1,000 yards and on the ground, but I don't see how can you have 3? We'll discuss it later maybe, but that's 4 going over 4.5. That it was like right in my mind, like that's now you're talking 3,000-yard receivers, and that's just tough. It's never been done, so don't expect it to be done, I guess is the answer there. In that vein of things that have never been done, back to Jeremiah Smith. The Jeremiah Smith receiving touchdowns was one submitted from at Wolf B121. They didn't give me a number, so I'm going to set it at 8.5 because the freshman receiving record for touchdowns at Ohio State is 8 by Chris Carter. So this is not fair to Jeremiah Smith to say, hey, the line on your touchdowns is either a school record or tying a school record. And if you don't tie the school record, we're all very disappointed. If you don't set the school record, it's just a very disappointing season for you. And that's one of the reasons he said he doesn't buy into the expectations, because you can go into a game and not do much. And I'll remind people, Marvin Harrison Jr. had, I think, 2 games of 3 catches for 22 yards last year. So these things can happen. Over under 8.5 touchdown catches for Jeremiah Smith, Tom.
How many games did Chris Carter play in his freshman year at Ohio State?
Probably I believe
12, I'm guessing.
11 or 12, yeah.
11 or 12, yeah. How many games is Jeremiah Smith going to play this year if he's healthy?
12 to 16, 17?
Yeah. So it feels to me like even if he wanted to try and make this an apples to apples comparison with Jeremiah Smith and literally an NFL Hall of Fame receiver who played at the same school, the offenses are different. They're throwing the ball more than they did back then. And also, he's potentially going to have like a third again as many games as Chris Carter had. So to me, over 8.5 feels something would have to go wrong, whether that's injury or just, level of play not being everything that we have seen and heard that it will likely be, or Ohio State getting knocked out very early in the playoff and, only playing 12 or 13 games this year. It would probably take something like that for me to think like I could plausibly see, the under being a more likely outcome here. I think you're looking at some, not quite black swan events, but you're looking at some outlier events being necessary for him to not go over that, given the fact that he's potentially playing like 4 extra games. So yeah, I'm going over 8.5 there. I honestly thought you were going to say about 10, and then I was going to maybe have to think about it a little bit. 10.5.
Well, I think I'm going over that with just 12 games, honestly, in the regular season. Because again, there's going to be at least one, probably more than one, games where he has multiple touchdowns. And that's just how it's going to be. So there you go. There's some Jeremiah Smith for you. This one comes from at TD and G, offensive and defensive third down conversion rates. Now, they didn't give me any numbers, so I went through and looked at the conversion rates offensively and defensively for Ohio State since Ryan Day has been the head coach. And I thought it was interesting. Last year in 2023 and 2022, they had the same number of third down attempts on offense. And last year, they only picked up 3 fewer first downs than the year before, which is interesting. So last year, they were at 43.4% offensively picking up first downs, a conversion rate. And the year before that, 45.2%. In his 5 years, they've done better than 50% just twice. That was in 2021 and 2019. 2019 was the best at 55.2%. If I take every third down opportunity in Ryan Day's 5 years as head coach, I didn't go and look at the 3 games from 2018. I'm not trying to skew these stats crazily, but they are at 49.2% conversion rate offensively. And the 2021 and the 2019 team, like I said, both over 50. I feel like this should be closer to the 2019 type of offense with the running game. And I feel like they're going to stay ahead of schedule. So if I set that at 49.2%, knowing that the only 2 teams that Ryan Day has had that have gone over that are 2021 and 2019, where are you going?
I feel like we're really setting ourselves up to get freezing cold taked here. I'm going over that again because they weren't. What were they last year?
43.4.
43.4. I mean, I think they're going to be substantially better than that because you've got the running game should be better. You've got a healthy Travion Henderson, which they did not have for basically half of last season. You've also got Quinshon Judkins. The offensive line should be better. You've got the running threat at quarterback, which you didn't have last year. You've got Chip Kelly, which should help with the offense. I mean, there's like a million different reasons why this should be a better offense on the ground, which is where you pick up a lot of your third downs. You're not, when you're in a 3rd and 8, you're kind of not expecting to pick that up. It's the ones where it's 3rd and 3 and they would get stuffed last year, 3rd and 2 and they got stuffed last year, where it felt like they got stuffed a lot. Those should be, I don't know what they were on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1 last year, but it felt at times like it was about 28%. I'm sure it wasn't actually that low, but that's certainly what it felt like at times. This year, I'm expecting 3rd and 1 to be not quite automatic, but, at least what the national average of 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2 conversion is, if not better. I think there's going to be a significant increase in the 3rd and short kind of pickups this year. So I will go over the 49.2. I'm not necessarily expecting them to be over the 55, which they had in 2019. That would be, boy, if they're over the 55 they had in 2019, that's a real good season. It's possible. You've got all the stuff that I just said working for you in that, and then you have the wide receivers where, it's 3rd and 12. Well, go throw a jump ball to Jeremiah Smith and see if he does, run the Jeremiah Smith do something cool play and see if that works. It feels like, I've said this before, it feels like those 50-50 balls are more like 75-25 balls at times. So, hey, maybe that works. But there's a lot pointing to they should be substantially better in 3rd and short, which means they should be substantially better in 3rd down conversions overall.
I was just looking at the JT Barrett era, and in 2016, 2017, they're at like 46.5. 2014, they were pretty good at like 52. Then I was also looking at UCLA, and in 2022, they were at like 50.2%. So Chip Kelly can get it done. And last year's UCLA offense, third down conversion rate was better than Ohio State's. They were at like 45 point something. So defensively, Tom, this is also interesting. So last year, Ohio State had one of the best third down conversion rates in the nation. And I'll bring it up real quickly. And it was number 5 nationally, 28.57, so 28.6. They faced 189 third down opportunities, and opponents converted 54 of them. The year before, they faced 2 fewer third down opportunities and gave up 2 more conversions. So they were at 29.95 in 2022. 2021, avert your ears. They were at 42.1% giving up third downs. So when you average, and that's going to be an outlier, so that's going to help the average. If you average all of these under Ryan Day as head coach, the defensive third down conversion rate is 32.9%, which is something that they have done. They did it in 2019 at 29.1%, 2022 at 29.95%, and 2023 at 28.6%. So using that 32.9 seems like, no, let's not do that. Let's go ahead and go, let's just keep it under 28. No, let's go ahead and use 28.6. We'll make it 28.5 because last year's was 28.6. Here's my thing, Tom. I think the starters are going to be fantastic, but there are going to be some yards and some first downs given up in the fourth quarter of these games. So if I set it at 28.5% defensive conversion, I'm going over that because it's, that's what they've done every other year. So that still seems like a low number, but where are you at, Tom?
Okay, so you just said 15 different
Yes.
numbers
Mhm.
in a seemingly random mishmash of an order. It's also unclear whether them going over the number is a good thing or a bad thing in terms of
Higher,
defensive
yes.
third down conversion. So can you just give me what is the best year of defensive third down conversions and whether if they have fare better than that, it would be over or under?
So yes, last year was the best year, and over meaning the numbers were the number is they give up a higher percentage of third downs. So there you
Okay,
go.
and the number last year was what?
28.6.
Okay, so we're just using last year's
Yeah.
number. I think they're going to go under that number. I think they give up slightly fewer. I mean, you're in an area where, we run into this. We're going to run into this, I'm sure, later, because I'm sure there's going to be one about points scored per game, and they gave up like 11 points a game last year. So, there gets to a point where it's like you really can't realistically pick lower than that. 28% of third down conversions is real low. I think you're going to see with the pass rush and the coverage being as good as it can be, I think you're going to see them forcing a lot of third and longs, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. And just like I said on offense, you are not expecting to convert that. And you're certainly not expecting to convert that if you're going up against Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun and Jordan Hancock and Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom and everyone else back who's going to be out there on those plays. I'm going to say they're under that slightly. I'm not expecting like a 24% or anything like that, but I think this year's defense is going to be better than last year's defense because you got all these guys back for, virtually everyone is back from last year's defense. The linebackers were probably the weakest of the 3 units last year, and you're replacing those guys. So it's not like you lost a bunch of first round draft picks off the team. Plus you're adding Caleb Downs. It just feels like this year's defense should be better than last year's defense. So I am going to say under 28.6%.
Right, then I think you're wrong. I think it's going to be around 30%. And should somebody be fired for that? Yes, somebody should be. You, Tom, you should be fired. Here's one that I like, and it's from at DBAAU 2021. He's setting the number for combined rushing yards for Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins. So get a number in your mind. Are you ready, Tom? Are you ready for the number to be revealed?
I am ready for the number to be revealed.
The number is 2,400 yards for those two.
What's funny is I had a number in my head and I thought, I bet he's going to say something like 2,400. And then I'm finally going to be able to go under something. And hallelujah, I can go under something. I think there's a decent possibility both of those guys reach 1,000 yards. But in order for them to reach 1,000 yards, you're going to have 1,200 and 1,000 or something like that. I don't think you can have both of those guys get to 1,000 yards and have one of them be at 1,500 or something like that. So if you're going to get there, I think these carries are going to be split. I think just in terms of load management, they're going to be trying to split those carries as much as possible. They are probably going to have, how many games are you expecting one of those guys to have significantly over 15 carries? I think that number is going to be fairly low. You may in the Oregon game, if one of the guys has kind of got the hot hand, you may see 18, 20 carries that way. Otherwise, I think there's going to be a lot of 12 to 15 carry games because Will Howard is going to have some carries, and you do have to throw the ball in order to get your 2.5 wide receivers to 1,000 yards. So I think under 2,400 for those two guys together.
I keep using the number of games as 16, but that is no guarantee that they're going to make it either to the national championship game or one game short of that and had to play in the first round. So 16 is a lot of games, and it's a very difficult baseline to go by. And so if we do that, I mean, you're talking 150 yards per game for those two, 75 yards per person. And an exercise that we probably need to do at some point is how many fourth quarters do you expect these guys to play in? And if you could go down the schedule, I don't expect to see either of them in the fourth quarter of any non-conference games. And I don't know, is it half the conference games where you would expect them to both be alive and playing in Iowa, most likely Michigan, Penn State, Oregon? Are there any other out of those four where you're like, yeah, I mean, they'll definitely, I mean, there's certainly could happen. Yes. But
yeah,
there's not a lot of there. Maybe.
Yeah. Nebraska, maybe. Just, when you look at the projected spreads on these games, there's a lot of Ohio State by 17, Ohio State by 21, and, going up from there. There's not a lot of games projected to be 2-score games at the end of the game, and probably not going to be 2-score games in the fourth quarter. And I think, as long as they feel good about James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon in terms of ball security, I think you're going to see those guys getting a bunch of carries because you might as well play them. Like, what are the odds you have a fifth-year running back at Ohio State? When was the last running back to play 5 years at Ohio State? I can't remember one. I mean, it feels like either you're good enough to be off to the NFL, or you are not getting enough carries and you're off to somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see a 5-year running back at Ohio State, so I don't know if there's much of a point to redshirting guys necessarily. So if they feel good about those two carrying the ball, I think you're going to, and in terms of ball security and in terms of all the other stuff, you're going to see they're going to rotate the quarterbacks through. You're going to see, all the quarterbacks can run. They want to get all these guys into games too. So I think you're going to see, those two running backs, Trevion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Tony, let's do it as an over-under. One or both has a carry in the fourth quarter. Let's say 5.5 games in the regular season.
Oh, if only I had my schedule up and looking.
Well, it's basically,
but you're right.
Michigan, yes, probably. Oregon, yes, probably. Penn State, yes, probably. Iowa, yeah, probably. Nebraska, 50-50. And then, Tony, there's always a stupid game somewhere. There's always, they're going to go to Michigan State and it's going to be, how is this game still a 13-point game in the fourth quarter? Or whoever it is this year, there's always a stupid game. Purdue, Indiana, like Northwestern. It's a crazy windy day. Can you imagine, Tony, a crazy windy day at Northwestern? There's a stupid one in there somewhere, and it just kind of hinges to me on, is there a stupid one? And then does it happen in the Iowa and Nebraska games?
Yeah, no, I would take the over, because anything less than that, you're talking about an ideal situation, and betting on an ideal situation is not the way to go. I'm also going under 2,400, by the way, just in case you're keeping score at home. Here's one from @WolfB121. Tom, the number of 75-plus yard touchdown drives surrendered by the Ohio State defense this year. Would you like the number of that they gave up last year? Or would you just like to take a guess and go without any other information?
This feels like one where I would love to have a little more information, and also one where I'd love to have the number for in the first 3 quarters of the game, and I'd like to have that number for last year and that number to bet on for this year, because it feels like that's one where the fourth quarter feels like it kind of shouldn't count on this one. But go ahead.
No, and I did not break it down by quarter, but they gave up 15 total touchdowns last year, which is pretty good, right? I mean, we can agree that that's pretty good.
Basically 1 and change per game. Yeah, pretty good. Yes.
However, 11 of those went for 75 yards or more. And in fact, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 went exactly 75 yards because of the fair catch rule. But 11 touchdown drives of 75 yards or more this year given up by this Ohio State defense. I'm going over because, again, I think they're going to play a lot of young guys late in games. And I can just tell you, Youngstown State had a 75-yard touchdown drive. Western Kentucky had a 75-yard touchdown drive. So those things happen. Now, Missouri had 2 90-plus yard drives, and that was it was what it was. But I think you're going to see some of the young guys give up some yards. So I'm going over 11. Yeah, that's fine. I'd say 11 and a half or whatever, but I'm going over. Or
Yeah,
yeah, over.
I'm with you there. I think you're going to have, a combination of young guys giving up something towards the end of the game, and they're going to be playing those guys a bunch. I was just pulling up the Youngstown State's touchdown drive was in the first quarter. 7:42 left in the first quarter. They had theirs, and Western Kentucky's was in the also first half. That was second quarter. So this stuff is going to happen occasionally in against the first team defense. But again, this is one where 11 is, it's very hard to give up fewer than that number of long touchdown drives during the course of the season, just because you have to be almost perfect. Like that's, one play, someone slips and boom, you go 75 yards. You have, the fourth quarter, you're playing the third string. Somebody makes a mistake. If true freshman's in there and makes a mistake at safety or whatever, and you go. So it would be almost impossible to go under 11. So I will go over 11 and a half. It just feels like the odds that things are so perfect, and also that holds for, potentially 14, 15, 16 games, that feels like that's asking probably too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They also had a 73-yard touchdown drive given up to Penn State. Of course, everybody remembers the 7-yard touchdown drive given up to Michigan as well. Tom, you're going to like this one. This one also comes from @WolfB121. The number of plays that Ryan Day gets overturned by challenging the play now that he presumably will be paying attention. I will set the number at 0.5.
The number of plays that Ryan Day gets overturned by challenging. How many? This is one of these things that I can't off the top of my head remember one getting overturned on challenge last year. But, I feel like this might also.
I will add, you don't have to necessarily challenge, but if you want to call a timeout to give them more time to think about it, perhaps as well. I think that is also a game management issue and a situation that we can go ahead and incorporate in here.
Yeah, I will say over, just because you only have to have it happen once, and the odds are it happens once. I'm trying to remember this, and then I'm trying to remember that I don't know what made me think of this. I was trying to remember if there was any point last year. I felt like we went through like 11 or 12 games last year where they never brought the chains out on the field to measure a first down. Like I remember thinking that halfway through the season. I don't know if I've seen that all year, and it's one of those like really stupid things that I am absolutely not going to go back and rewatch games to see if they have brought the chains out, but I just couldn't remember any time that it happened. Yeah, Ryan Day challenging something successfully and having it overturned, like that's one of those things that, like, yeah, it probably happened 4 times last year, and I'm just not remembering it. But the odds are, at some point, Tony, with the state of college football officiating these days, feels like there's plenty of mistakes out there to be overturned. So I will say yes. At some point, they challenge something or call a timeout, and something gets overturned.
Because basically, Ohio State is like, the replay is being done anyway, so why should I have to do anything to make it happen? But I wouldn't be shocked if there's a timeout call just to make sure. and also to have the timeout. I'm going to wrap up with two more here, Tom. We've got so many more. We'll eventually get to them, but I wanted to throw this one is from at JRS_rankings. He wants to know the over-under on Michigan coaches suspended this year. I will set the number once again at 0.5, and it's pretty crazy that it's something that you have to think about. And no other team in college football over the past, 20 years, 10 years, let's start with 2019. Over the past, say 5 or 6 years, have you had to think, gosh, I wonder if anybody's going to be suspended? So I'm going to set the number at 0.5. Tom, am taking the under because I'm not sure anything is going to be resolved in such a way this season with any type of punishment being handed down.
2025 Los Angeles Chargers offensive line coach Sharon Moore. Is that what I'm hearing? It feels like that's what I'm hearing. Yeah, I'm probably going under on this one because we still, as of Tuesday, August 13th at about 2:30 in the afternoon, have not seen a notice of allegations from the NCAA. If and when that does come out, even if that came out on August 15th, Michigan would have 90 days to respond to that. So 3 months, so that would get you to November 15th. And then, the odds that the NCAA issues suspension, it would be pretty, what's a combination? This feels like there should be a German word for like funny but spiteful, like one of those compound words. It feels like it would be very funny but spiteful for Michigan to get, sorry, Sharon Moore is suspended like on the Tuesday before the Ohio State game. I don't know that the NCAA could get it together that quickly in order to make that happen, but yeah, I think just the odds are this will probably drag on. There was the report that he had deleted a bunch of texts and that would set him up to be a repeat violator. So odds are he's going to get suspended at some point. But, whoever they open up against in 2025, it feels like that's probably, Sharon Moore is not coaching when they're playing UConn or UTEP or Utah State or whoever it is in the first game of the 2025 season rather than something in 2024. So, Tony, under, but with some reservations.
Yeah, I think you can't be totally confident. And I think the German spiteful but funny word you're looking for is Schadenbaugh. Half Schadenfreude, half Harbaugh, of course. Last one for you, Tom. This is one that I came up with all on my own with my big brain. Total number of regular season wins over Michigan this year. I am setting the number at 0.5. I am going to take the over on that one, Tom. I feel like you should not lose at home. You have the better roster. It's whether or not it's time or you're due, like you've got the better roster, you're at home, you really, really need this one. So I'm taking the over on 0.5.
I am also going to take the over on 0.5, and I'm sure everyone's going, oh, these two homers. I will remind you, both Tony and I picked Michigan to win last year in a game where it was very much not certain who was going to win. So, yeah, this just feels like a year where Michigan is basically starting from scratch on offense, just about outside of Donovan Edwards and Colton Loveland. And Ohio State is very much not starting from scratch on either side of the ball, plus the games in Columbus, plus Connor Stalions is in the Netflix business now. And, you've got a lot of uncertainty around this year's Michigan team. I don't want to oversimplify and go, their quarterbacks could be like real bad this year, but their quarterbacks could be like real bad this year. Alex Orji has thrown one pass in his career, and I don't think there's hiding a secretly awesome arm under the, under tarp and waiting to pull it off and spring him on people this season. And the other leading contender is Jack Tuttle, who has been in college since about the Carter administration and still has not really ever been an outstanding college quarterback. So again, I don't think this is probably a long con that the entire college football world is running, that Jack Tuttle is secretly about to win the Heisman Trophy. Maybe it is. A successful long con requires, Tony, that you don't see it coming. So maybe it is, but it just feels like you're replacing your whole offensive line, you're replacing your whole wide receiver unit, you're replacing your quarterback. You don't have a real obvious replacement there. plus you're kind of turning over a bunch of your coaching staff, plus you're playing on the road, plus the Ohio State team's pretty good. Like it feels like if you give me two choices, Ohio State wins that game by 21 or more, and Michigan wins that game by 1 or more, I think Ohio State wins the game by 21 or more is the more likely of those two to happen this year.
If I were to say set the number of total number of wins over Michigan this year at 1.5, what kind of like plus 800, plus 1,200 would you need to take that bet? What kind of juice do you need there?
Yeah, I'd need a decent number, probably like a plus 800 or something in that neighborhood,
Mhm.
because it could happen. But, for that to happen, Michigan either needs to make the Big Ten championship game, which would require being one of the two best teams in the Big Ten. And I don't think they're going to be as good as Oregon. And I don't think they're going to be as good as Ohio State. And I think Penn State might be between them and Oregon and Ohio State. So that's not necessarily going to happen. And yeah, they could make the college football playoff, and there are certainly plenty of projection systems and magazines that have projected them in there. But then they have to not only make it, but they
Mhm.
have to also be set up to play Ohio State in the second round, and then they need to win their first game. I don't think any of those is super likely. I think there's a real possibility Michigan goes 9-3 and is playing in whatever they're calling the Citrus Bowl these days or something like that, more so than playing in the college football playoff and winning a game and then playing Ohio State.
Can you imagine the thought process? And I guess we can because they've done it before, but wouldn't they want to keep like Michigan and Ohio State kind of like in the same region just to be able to have them playing into like to get into the national championship or something like that, or to make that to be in the Final Four, to better guarantee that you're going to have that type of game with that kind of hype and that rivalry.
Well, we've talked about this before. There are some of the projection systems. We've done this on the morning show.
Mhm.
We've kind of gone through the different brackets, like, here's how Phil Steele's potential college football playoff field would play out. And there are scenarios in some of them. I don't remember if it was Phil Steele, but there was one of them where Ohio State and Michigan playing in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day was a possibility. Now, the Ohio State Michigan rivalry is obviously, we talk about that on this show frequently as like that is a week that both of us really love, and it's a great rivalry, and it's one of the best things about college football. The Rose Bowl, also one of the best things about college football. So like combining those two, it's like you got chocolate in my peanut butter, you got peanut butter in my chocolate, you got Michigan in my Rose Bowl. Like 100% would be fantastic. I could absolutely see them setting that up. And if that first Ohio State Michigan game is close,
Hmm.
let's say that's a Ohio State wins 31-24 kind of game, something like that. An Ohio State Michigan rematch in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State Michigan is always the most watched regular season game, virtually every year. The Rose Bowl is the most watched game pretty much regardless, outside of like national championship game or sometimes the college football playoff games. The Rose Bowl is the most watched game. Can you imagine the TV numbers that an Ohio State versus Michigan Rose Bowl would do? I mean, I'm sure the college football playoff committee is not solely in the market of making their TV partners some money. However, if they have the opportunity to set that up without having to shuffle things around too much, I could absolutely see that happening. If they're not moving Michigan up 4 slots or anything like that to make that happen, but if it's just like, well, you shift the 7 seed and the 8 seed in some direction and set that up, like they would be idiots not to do that.
And then they just sublease the game to TNT for no money. Yeah, I'm sure.
That's the first round. That's not the second round.
All right, so there you go. There's a bunch of over-unders for your season preview type of thing for the Buckeyes. And like I said, we'll get some more on this because you guys really helped us out, and we always appreciate that. Also appreciate you going ahead and hit the thumbs up on this YouTube if you're watching it, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle as always. And whatever platform you're listening to this on in podcast form, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating and review. We would appreciate that as well. As always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.